right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the December 13th, 2021 meeting of the Planning and Development Committee. We have a quorum, so I'm going to call us to order and ask Johanna to call the roll, please.
Councilmember Nguyen?
Here.
Councilmember Newsmen?
Here.
Councilmember Ravel?
Here.
Councilmember Burns?
Here.
Councilmember Reed?
Here.
Okay. So our first two items of business are approval of our minutes from our last two meetings. Could I have a motion for the minutes of October 25th?
Madam Chair, I'll move approval of the minutes of the regular Planning and Development Committee meetings of October 25th and November 22nd.
Second. Any discussion? Then roll call, I guess.
Councilmember Nguyen?
Aye.
Councilmember Newsma?
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Okay. So we have two items of business this evening, and we're going to take them P1 first, P2 first, and then P1. And so, so first I'll ask if there's any public comment for item P2, which is about the bus shelter program.
We have no public comment for P2.
Okay. Then I think we have a staff presentation.
Yes, so Jessica Hink, our Transportation Mobility Coordinator, is, Kimberly Richardson? Hold on one second, Jessica.
Your mic, you can't be heard.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Just for order, I'll move item P2, discussion on bus shelter.
Second.
Okay, so Jessica Hink, our Transportation and Mobility Coordinator, is on the Zoom and is going to provide a brief presentation summary overview of this situation.
Good evening, members of the Planning and Development Committee. As Johanna mentioned, I'm going to provide an overview of the city's bus shelter program. And I am going to share my screen. Okay, so to start, these are two shelters that kind of exemplify the current city's bus shelter program. The one on the left is with Creative Outdoor Advertising, the current contractor with the city, and the one on the right is an unknown entity, but we have quite a few of those in Evanston. Our agreement with Creative Outdoor Advertisement started 10 years ago and includes the maintenance, except for snow removal, on 7 bus shelters on CTA routes and 1 bus shelter on PACE route. And COA does own these bus shelters. There are advertisements on these shelters, and the city may choose to not allow certain advertisements. COA is unwilling to expand this current program, however, due to a lack of advertisement revenue. These bus shelters are not ADA compliant when there is a bench inside. This was a finding of the Federal Highway Administration in 2016. However, the bench can be removed to make them ADA compliant. That does make the shelter less comfortable for people who want to use a bench. The contract expires this April 2022. As I mentioned, there are other shelters within the city with various owners. Some are owned by PACE and some are unknown entities and some are owned by the city. Some of these shelters are ADA compliant, while some are not. Generally, these shelters do not have ads, but they are very dated and the infrastructure is also very inconsistent. The top 2 shelters do have, are ADA compliant, while the bottom shelter is not ADA compliant. A person who is using a wheelchair cannot get into that shelter. The PACE Bus Shelter program has come to the attention of the city. It's a no-cost program to the city. It includes installation of bus shelters as well as maintenance, including snow removal, whereas the COA program does not include snow removal. PACE will remove old shelters as part of this program and replace them with new shelters at no cost to the city. The designs that PACE includes for the bus shelter program were presented to the Historic Preservation Commission, and they had no objections to the designs. Advertisements must be allowed in order to participate in the PACE program, and PACE will pay the city a pro rata share of 1/2 of the total net billings. However, PACE has noted, as COA has noted, that the advertisement revenue at bus shelters is down, largely due to the pandemic. These are the designs that the city can choose from for the PACE shelter program. These designs are in several communities throughout the Chicago region. If the bus stop has enough ridership, then an LED sign with real-time bus tracking information is also included at the shelter, as displayed in the upper right corner. Unfortunately, PACE will not install shelters at CTA only stops. They will install shelters at shared PACE and CTA stops. CTA does not have a bus shelter program. However, the city could choose to purchase PACE-designed bus shelters for CTA only stops to ensure that there's a consistent design of infrastructure and bus shelter infrastructure within the city. There are two options that the city could currently consider for paying for the purchase of CTA only bus shelters. The city was selected in 2020 for the RTA Access to Transit Award, and we are expecting this year or at the beginning of 2022 to receive an intergovernmental agreement formalizing that award through a CMAQ funding source. Additionally, the city could consider entering into an advertisement agreement similar to COA or what PACE does for the purchase of their bus shelter program. However, as noted, advertisement revenue is down, and so it may be very difficult to find an advertisement agreement that would be sufficient to install bus shelters on just CTA routes. There's a course of action that the city can consider taking. It's recommended that the city enter into an IGA with PACE for bus shelter installation and maintenance to coordinate the proposed bus shelter locations with PACE and CTA. As part of the intergovernmental agreement with PACE, the city will be able to veto locations and also to recommend other locations. And because CTA does not have their own program and it is funded by other revenue sources, then the city has a larger determination in where those shelters go. After shelters are determined, it is recommended that a public outreach is conducted on the bus shelter locations to make sure that there is community member and residential member buy-in, and then to finalize that funding source for the CTA only stops. In addition to purchasing the shelters for the CTA only stops, the city would also need to contract for bus shelter maintenance at the CTA only stops, and that could be selected through either a sole source in order to ensure the same maintenance is occurring at CTA only stops at bus shelters as PACE bus shelters, or through an RFP to ensure a competitive process. And with that, I will turn it back to the Planning and Development Committee.
Thank you very much. So committee members, questions or comments? Councilmember Nguyen.
Well, I want to thank staff for such a thorough memo and such a very good presentation on the options and choices that we have. And I think that going forward with the recommendations of the staff makes the most sense. Certainly working to get uniformity in our bus stops, and then getting community input into where are the best places to put them. And then also taking advantage of the pace maintenance and snow removal, I think is really critical. And then actually, I like the idea of contracting with the same maintenance company for the CTA bus shelters as well.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Newsmen.
I'll echo much of what Councilmember Nguyen said, and to pick up on that last point, I like using the same contractor to provide services for both styles, as long as the cost is reasonable. Do you have any idea, Jessica, if we went out for an RFP for maintenance on the CTA stations, if we could expect it to be any cheaper than the deal you would get through Pace? Through Pace's contractor, I should state.
I don't anticipate that it would be any cheaper, although it's hard to say for sure. But the reason why I do not anticipate that it would be cheaper is because Pace's contractor would already be coming to Evanston to perform maintenance. So presumably it would be cheaper for them to also maintain the CTA shelters while they're in Evanston.
So would we negotiate a separate deal with that contractor at the Pace rate, or negotiate our own rate?
It would likely be our own rate, because Pace holds the contract for the maintenance of the shelters.
Okay.
And the city would not have the contract with the maintenance provider of the Pace shelters. And so it would need to be a separate contract with a separate negotiation.
But if we did go out,
Our hope would be that we could try to get the same price, given that they're already here. I think staff's biggest concern is if we went with somebody else, it's Pace and CTA buses, most people won't tell the difference.
Yeah.
So they're going to say, wait, why? They forgot if the contractor hasn't shown up. So I think having one entity doing all of them, so there's not, I could already envision that we would get a 301 saying somebody forgot a Pace or a bus shelter, and we're tracking down, we're calling, and then they're like, we haven't gotten there, that's Pace. Like, it's just going to add to staff time.
it does make a lot of sense to use the same contractor. So how many shelters are we talking about altogether? Like that, I don't have a firm grasp on that. Like, we have 12 CTA right now and 7 Pace right now. But is that what we're talking about moving forward, or we're talking about additional shelters?
There is the potential that there could be additional shelters. It will be based on ridership. Ridership on buses has gone down because of the pandemic. However, Pace and CTA maintained all service levels in Evanston. Pace did cut service in other communities, but the ridership in Evanston has always remained high enough in order to keep all routes during the pandemic. And I don't foresee that there certainly would not be fewer shelters, and I would anticipate the potential for additional shelters being identified.
So we have 19 total now, some of which we don't know where they came from.
That's correct. They are so old, and that there is no record of who placed them or when they were placed, unfortunately.
And so moving forward, how are we going to keep track of the new ones so that in another 15, 20 years?
Hopefully we'll have better records.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Well, I think this meeting in and of itself is a record
Yeah.
of that. There probably wasn't that. I was looking, those have been around most of my lifetime, so I don't, it may have been provided at one point by CTA or Pace or the RTA even, when it was first founded. I think in the late 70s, really, yeah, so it's been, no.
Well, it's 25, 26 years old. Exactly. Right, got it. So, and we're talking about replacing every bus shelter in town then? Even the ones we don't know where they came from?
Yes, that would be the recommendation from staff in order to have updated, modern, ADA compliant shelters and to have a consistent, uniform design for ease of use by public transit users and riders.
And can you explain the difference between an ADA compliant shelter and the ones we have currently? Is it just the bench?
So ADA is the Americans with Disability Act requirements, and it means that a person using an assistive device, most frequently a wheelchair, is able to get into the shelter and to to be covered. And so with the design of the bus shelters from the last contract, with the addition of the bench in those shelters, a person in a wheelchair cannot pull into the shelter. And the design of the shelter cuts at an angle in the front instead of continuing in a rectangle across the open part. So a person could pull into that spot but would not be fully covered.
And so the new shelters that we would be installing would have a bench for mobile people to be able to sit down on, and also sufficient space for a wheelchair to be sheltered.
Yes, that's right. All of the PACE shelter designs have a bench and have a space for people to pull in with a wheelchair.
Got it. Okay. And do we have, I know there are several options on the PACE, the PACE brochure. Have we narrowed our choice down?
There are two designs that are have a slimmer profile, which is very important in locations where we have narrow sidewalk. So in order to keep the sidewalk ADA compliant and to keep the shelter ADA compliant in those locations, we would need to select either design option 5 or design option 6. In areas where there is more space in the right-of-way for a shelter and to maintain ADA access along the sidewalk, there are larger shelters that have a comparable design to option 5 or 6, and those larger shelters would be utilized in those locations where space allows.
Great. And then one more question about the back to the maintenance topic. For those shelters that would not be included in the PACE program, we would be paying one way or the other. How much are we talking about there?
Typically, shelters cost around $5,000 per shelter, and that can often include maintenance. However, if there are any issues with grading where the slope of the sidewalk is too steep for a person using a wheelchair to access, there would need to be grading improvements, or if the current sidewalk has cracks and is broken, that would need to be replaced as well. So it depends on current site conditions.
So those are to install the new ones, but once they're installed, then there's an annual maintenance contract with snow, removal. How much is that maintenance?
That is something that staff is continuing to look into. And so until either sole source or RFP is selected, I won't have the final cost for the maintenance.
And is there a way we could continue to sell advertising space?
Yes. And so that is something that we could do. We're doing it currently with the COA shelters. It would be a part of the PACE program, and the city could expand it to the shelters on the CTA only stops.
Right. So I'm talking about just about the CTA only stops. Right now, those are managed by COA, or at least 7 of the 12. If we move away from COA, would we have to go with another third party to manage advertisement? If we're installing the shelters at our expense, to have them, match the PACE shelters, is there an advertising company that would that would place ads on the shelters that we own?
Yes, and the city has contracted previously for advertisements at divvy stations, and so contracting for advertisements at the CTA only bus shelters would be similar to that previous program.
Okay. Thank you, Jessica. Nothing
You're welcome.
further from me.
Yeah, Councilmember Burns.
Hey Jessica, I was just wondering if there's a list of ridership for all of the bus routes in the city, because I've heard that come up as a determining factor for a lot of issues. So I think especially ones that run through the Fifth Ward. I'm just personally interested to know what ridership looks like at each of those routes in the ward.
So,
Yes, so
Yeah, go
the
ahead,
city
go ahead.
has relationships with staff members at CTA and at PACE, and we are able to get ridership numbers for all bus stops and routes in Evanston.
Okay, I'll reach out. I'll reach out separately to you about that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I can throw my hat in the ring as
Oh,
well.
yeah, Councilmember Reed.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Jessica. I also just want similar data to Councilmember Burns. I think I heard you say that the data is available by stop, which I think will be really important, because by route, there can be busy routes, such as the 93 that runs through parts of my ward, the Fifth Ward. There may be an overall busy route, but really which stops are the busiest stops. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the biggest thing that I want. I think Councilmember Newsmen got the question answered. It's about $5,000 per stop per shelter. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you for this presentation.
Yes, indeed. Thanks, Jessica. It's really helpful to have this thorough overview of our bus shelter situation in Evanston. So to review what I think we are saying to staff, that we would support our entering into an IGA with PACE to provide bus shelters and bus shelter maintenance at the PACE only and the shared PACE and CTA bus stops, and all the coordinating and for the location and the public engagement piece. For the CTA only bus stops, we need to identify a funding source for those, and there was a mention in the memo and from Jessica about the RTA access to transit program, but the memo indicated that that might not come through in time for us to have the bus shelters in 2022. So would we want to extend the contract with COA for another year? Is that, or we leave that up to staff when the time comes?
Why don't we see where we're at in the
Okay.
spring and how much we've gotten done?
Right, okay.
And we will have to bring the IGA back
Sure.
to this
Right,
group,
right,
to
okay.
APW.
Right. And I think there's definite agreement with staff about having the maintenance for all the bus shelters be handled by the same contractor. So is that enough direction? Any other?
It is, it's great. But we did, since we did a accept and place on file and we moved in second, we should probably take a vote.
Okay.
One quick question,
Yes.
because I just want to understand the difference. So I was told there's some IGAs that can be executed administratively. I just want to understand the difference of why this would need to come back. Is there a dollar amount associated with this? Are we paying?
I don't think there's a dollar amount. We've normally, those sorts of, when they've involved another governmental agency, often that governmental agency wants this governing body to have approved it.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
I think that's how we've done it typically in the
Yeah,
past.
that's helpful. Thank you.
Do we need to take an action here?
A roll call on, yes.
Accepting
I
and
think-
placing it
I
on
think we
file?
had a motion, didn't we? Yeah.
Councilmember Wynn?
Aye.
Councilmember Newsma?
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
All right, and so now we're ready for item P1 on our agenda, and I am going to be recusing myself from this discussion and ask my immediate predecessor, Councilmember Nguyen, to chair this part of the meeting. Do you want to come up here? Or
I can do it from here.
Okay.
Yeah, if everyone just raises their hand, that's fine. So do we have, Johanna, do we have a public comment on P2?
Yes, there is public comment for this.
Okay.
Oh, first, I will move item P2 for discussion.
P1, actually.
Or I'm sorry, yeah, P1.
Second.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We're still on P2. Did you ask that because we're still on P2, or?
No, you're good. I second
Okay.
the motion.
Do we need to call the roll for introducing it? No. Okay.
You have Joan Cherry and John Cara to speak. Is signed up for public comment.
Okay. Ms. Cherry, are you on our Zoom call?
I am.
Okay.
I am. Thank you for the opportunity to address this matter. And of course, now I'm speaking from the memorandum that was attached to the packet. And so my concern with this item is that it's really, it's described as a fee, but really what I think is contemplated here is an additional property tax on the 42 lakefront private properties. And that is very concerning because that's not something that municipalities don't have the power to raise assessments. That's done by the Cook County assessor. And so I'm concerned, number one, that this is really a tax, proposing a tax on a tax that's already in place, and that it's likely a request for an unconstitutional tax. So that is a major concern. And, I know that our lakefront is pretty well accessible. We have beaches, we have parks, we have Northwestern, which is the largest private landowner in the city along the lakefront. And I don't know about accessibility with Northwestern, but I know they don't pay any property taxes. And lakefront owners, property owners already pay enormously high property taxes on residential property. And I think a theoretical proposal to raise our assessment based on a perceived lack of public access is just a non-starter. And frankly, if there were higher taxes imposed, my understanding is that under Illinois law, that tax would probably end up being evened out over all of Evanston. So I think that this is probably a stealth way of raising property taxes. So I also think that when you're talking about this proposal, that it's really unjust that it falls only upon property owners who live on one side of a street. So I think I really laid this out in my memorandum that I filed with the clerk today, and so in more detail for your consideration. But we're really vigorously opposed to anything that looks like an additional property tax or a fee. I don't think legally you can impose a fee. A fee is something where the municipality provides service and then charges the person who is seeking the service a fee, like for a beach token or for parking along the lakefront, and you put money in a pay box to rent a parking space for 2 hours or whatever it is. Those are fees. But this is not a fee. This is proposing a tax. And so I just want to you to know that we're very opposed to this and hope that there's not even a study done of this. I do think that
Ms. Cherry, would you mind wrapping up?
no, I'm done.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Ms. Nyden?
No one else has signed up.
No one else has signed up. All right, that completes our public comment on P1. So now I'm opening it up to the committee.
Yes.
Okay, Councilmember
Hello.
Reed? Yeah.
Yes. I'm sorry. I know we met Johanna, Councilmember Revelle, and Dave Stonebeck and I met about this a few months ago. I think it slipped that this was coming up for this meeting. I actually planned on inviting a speaker to discuss this, but if I may, in lieu of that speaker, present a short, 6-minute video that I have here, if I'm able to share, where the speaker, Joe Minicozy, who is a public planner. I'm sorry, he is a certified. He's a member of he's a certified public planner with the AICP. He also graduated from Harvard Graduate School with a master's in architecture and urban design. And so he talks a bit about this in a short 6-minute clip that I've created. Chair, am I able to share that?
Wait, Councilmember Reed, is this on this particular topic?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Luke or whoever's running the Zoom, can you give me sharing ability? And when I say me, not this account, I have a second computer that is not with the screen visible where I'd want to share this from. So if you can give that a second, Devon Reed, ability to share. Okay.
Councilmember, you already have ability.
Okay, thank you. And is my screen being shared now?
No, not yet.
Oh, okay. There we go. Okay, share. All right, so my screen should be shared now. Is that correct? And then also, is the audio able to be heard?
I'm sorry, we couldn't hear
Okay,
you.
the audio actually may not be. When I press play, are you able to hear the audio?
We're not hearing anything yet.
Councilmember, it might be better for you to send the link to Anderson, let him present from his PC.
If the issue is I was muted, so I think now it's muted on that device. So here, let's try it.
Do that, like, so Chuck, you must be against
That's
parks
working.
then because parks don't pay any revenue. You must be against public buildings. Like, why would we ever build a courthouse or a city hall?
Volume's a little low if you want to turn it up. I don't know if that's us
Look
or
at-
YouTube.
I think it's you all. I'm up all the way.
At the city halls of the past that were not like cheap Walmart style buildings like we build today. They were gorgeous places. And you're like, well, why would people do that? Show us why, Joe.
Yeah, so Asheville's a good example because I'm completely surrounded by federal forests. I went out mountain biking last night. It was super awesome. I enjoy living here to go out and do that. So I take part of those parks. And I'll pay more to live here to have that facility. So we did the land value analysis. We did the full analysis of Minneapolis. What we were looking at is the dirt value per acre. So this is just dirt. There's no buildings. And here it is in 3D. And this is Minneapolis right here. And here's Wayzata. Wayzata is a
Wayzata. I'll give you the local pronunciation. It's Wayzata.
Wayzata. And basically, like the executives for 3M and all of the Fortune 5 Target, they all live out here and they take the highway in. It's the high-end suburban village that's out there. But we were just having the conversation with the staff at City of Minneapolis, and I just put this out there, and I was like, it looks a little weird that the dirt in downtown Wayzata is the same value as downtown Minneapolis, just on an apples-to-apples standpoint. And I think it was Paul Magouche, is a planner there. He's like, oh my God, you just proved the county ordinance 1983-22. He started going down all these numbers. I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, well, up until 1983, the county had a policy as Minnesotan. Everybody should have access to the lakes. We're a lakes place. We're all in this together. Very Minnesotan attitude. And they changed that policy to privatize the edge of the lakes, that people could then build their mansions along the edge of the lakes. And we all understand the concept of lakefront or oceanfront property, right? The property for the ocean and the lake doesn't disappear. It just slides up to the real estate next to it. So you see the value of the lake slides up to the crust along the edge of the lake. That seems fair. It seems reasonable. Well, what happens to the value immediately adjacent to that? Those people don't have the lake view, so therefore they have no value, right? So you've taken that opportunity of value and pushed it into the edge. Well, before that policy changed, these two lakes are publicly accessible. They also have a greenway around them. There's a park and a cemetery. There's a lot of public amenity around that. Because there's more people in the public that have access to it, that value is then transferred into this neighborhood. You see the dirt value in this neighborhood. That value is spread like butter into the neighborhood, as opposed to just sticking all your butter on the edge of your crust. So I think that as we talk about this stuff, a university has costs. Boston's a great example of this. Boston has 250 colleges and universities, an immense amount of non-taxable real estate, which means in cause and trouble, actually worked out this thing called a pilot, a payment in lieu of taxes, where they go to the...
I'm going to fast forward here very quickly because I think we're all familiar with pilots.
University for paying some tax. Yes, Harvard is a reality of business. They get it. So I think that's the thing is that as we talk about this stuff, universities, hospitals, they're all non-taxable, except for Colorado, hospitals are taxable. That's kind of interesting. It's different in every state, but these are needs in our community, and we're all experiencing that right now. Is I want to make sure that I have a good hospital here in town, especially with COVID going on. So these are costs of community, and we have to understand that we're all in this together as a corporation. So those amenities are necessary, and there's a public good in them. How do we make sure that we're getting that value back in the community?
Well, I feel like too, in this drawing here on the left, with the privatized shoreline, in Minnesota, we still have a requirement that all lakes are public. And so this is Lake Minnetonka on the left. There are public accesses on the lake. And if you live anywhere in the state of Minnesota, you can go to that public access and put your boat in and go out on the lake. But the actual shoreline is privatized. So there's no public access to the shoreline. And on the right, with the chain of lakes in Minneapolis, you've got the public access to not just the lake itself, but to the actual shoreline. And what that does is it creates this, it radiates the wealth of that green space back for blocks and blocks and blocks into the neighborhood. Now all those neighborhoods have their wealth increased because of that public amenity. You've got a public amenity in both places, it's just designed differently. And so when I look at like my courthouse here in town, I live on 4th Street in Brainerd. When I go out my front door and I look to the south, at the end of my street is the county courthouse, built in 1930 something. And it's got, very poor town, and it was poorer back then, the middle of the Depression. They built this thing with like Roman columns and like great classical symmetry, and it's at the very end of the street. It's kind of framed by the street itself. They did that so that the wealth of that investment, the value of that investment, it wasn't just utilitarian. It wasn't just functional. It was actually designed to make everybody around it wealthier, because now we've got this great like landmark in the middle of town. The new county building is kitty corner to the old one.
All right, I cut the video there.
Does that conclude the video?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay.
If he's done.
Yes. Councilmember Reed, are you done? Councilmember Newsman would like to make a
No.
comment.
I just wanted to start there. My point here is, what this research in Minnesota and Hennepin County demonstrates is that cutting off access to, the public lakefront has a negative impact on the wealth that is spread throughout. The metaphor there is, letting the butter, melt throughout the community as opposed to keeping it to the crust. And the request here is that we produce an RFP to get proposals for what a study might cost to look at the lost revenue to the city and the lost wealth to the city because of the fact that we have the number of properties that we have that are cutting off access to the lakefront.
Thank you. I'm going to call on Councilmember Newsman now.
Thank you, Interim Chair Wynn. I appreciate the sentiment, the progressive sentiment behind this, and looking for ways to it's no secret that people that can afford to live on the lakefront have extra wealth, and it would be great if we could spread that wealth around a little bit. I think on the merits of this argument, though, I don't think we have a strong argument because access to the lakefront is not an issue. We do have ample public access to the lakefront with our many beaches. And the lakefront that that the homeowners are on is not necessarily lakefront that the public would want to have access to. It's not like they're sitting on 30 yards of sandy beach that actually does belong to the public and the public should enjoy access to. That's not the case. Most of the lakefront homes, at least looking at Google Earth, have no beaches, and so there is nothing there to access. So I don't think the argument that Councilmember Reed is using here about lakefront access is not as strong as it is in Minnesota there. So I am not in favor of spending money going down this path because I don't think it would ultimately end up. I don't think it would end up going anywhere.
Councilmember Burns, did you want to speak next?
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't clear if the examples they provided were saying that there were only access point small areas for boat launches, or whether or not in these two examples in Minnesota they have ample kind of beach area. So that is a question I would have, but I think they didn't just mention beach access as much as it was lakefront access. So there was also talk of kind of open area and bike paths and other, public benefit and amenities that could be provided if we have more access to the lakefront. So I don't think what you just said captures the full argument, and that's really my main point. I don't think any of us up here looking at this for maybe an hour, if you did before the meeting, and if not the 10 minutes, the 5 minutes of the video are gonna know where to come down on this issue more than a Harvard grad that's been studying this for years. So I'm comfortable with exploring a lot of different options, including a real kind of continued conversation about a pilot agreement with Northwestern to reclaim revenue that our city needs. And depending on the cost, again, that's not provided in this memo. I think we need to continue to look into opportunities to generate additional revenue to add more value to homeowners across the city. And I see this as a research opportunity just to learn more. So for me, it really is going to come down to cost. You know, how much are we talking about? That wasn't provided in the memo. I know this is just discussion, but I would hope if this comes back, we could take a look at how much this will cost us.
And Chair, if I could add myself to the list again.
Councilmember Reed, I'll call on you, and then I have Councilmember Newsmen, then I would like to speak.
Okay. To those points, yes. Councilmember Newsman, and thank you, Councilmember Burns, for your reflections there. It does go beyond just beach access. Again, this is about lakefront access. We know that our lakefront, whether it's beach or not, is coveted space, as we've had our discussion with Clark Square, which is not traditional beach land. It is simply lakefront land, which is still very valuable. And the thing here is, I agree. I mean, I think what we're asking now, staff is asking for direction to go out for an RFP to get proposals for this. And I think we should at least take that step, have an understanding of what the cost might be. If this is a $400,000 project, or even, something along those lines, certainly not worth it. But if this is, a few tens of thousands of dollars, maybe even $100,000 to do this research, and this can bring in, this could potentially bring in a significant amount of revenue, and it would be in a progressive way, again, putting that burden on folks who can most afford it, particularly given the lost revenue opportunities for the city and the lost wealth for other residents that may be generated here. Councilmember Newsman went ahead with the response.
Go ahead. Jonathan, go ahead.
So I guess the argument is we're trying to get people to pay even more for what they're already paying even more for. I looked at a couple of properties, random properties. There is a house on the lake, a 3,500 square foot house immediately on the lakefront that paid last year around to $53,000 in property taxes. There was a larger house, about 25% larger, 4,983 square feet, that was in one house back, still east of Sheridan Road, but not on the lakefront, that paid $35,000. I'll say $36,000 if I add back in the exemption in property taxes. So, a bigger house and a bigger piece of property paying, 30% less in property taxes. The lakefront homeowners are already paying more, and I think we're asking them to pay even more on top of what they're already paying. So I would certainly understand an objection on that basis.
Okay.
Councilmember Wynn, would you mind if I directly respond to that?
Yes, if you would quickly, but I have quite a bit to say about this.
Okay, yeah, if I can just, okay. So I thank you for that point there as well, Councilmember Newsman, because I've done a slightly deeper analysis. Of course, we know that those folks pay their overall bill is fairly substantial, right? I did, here's an example, folks can verify these numbers. 6 Milburn Place, 2735 North Sheridan, 58, these are several addresses. For example, yes, they pay $59,000, $46,000 in property taxes for their total property. But when you look at that on a per square foot base, so then you look at the lot size, 45,000 square feet, 17,000 square feet. When you look at the per square foot charge, or the per square foot payment, they're paying less than folks in my ward per square foot. For example, one property that pays overall $59,000 in property taxes pays $1.37 per square foot of just land. While there are single-family homes to single-family home in my ward that are nowhere near the lakefront, that are modest homes, for example, on Brummel and other places that pay more than that, almost $2 per square foot, or $1.77 per square foot, which is more than one of our largest, wealthiest properties. And so, yes, their overall bill is larger. They have more land, but on a per square foot comparison, they're paying less than maybe even you. If you were to look at your property taxes and calculate it on per square foot basis, they are paying less in many cases.
All right, thank you. So there are a number of issues that I have with this proposal. First of all, the materials that we received, I'd like to address that because we did not have this video, which I think is already incredibly unclear. But the materials that we did receive was an article written by a summer college intern that looked at 2 lakes in Minnesota. One is in Minneapolis, and it is completely surrounded with a path and some public access that's right in Minneapolis. The other one was another lake out 10 miles outside that had no public access, was all privately owned. And their argument in this, which they admitted was flawed because there were many other variables as well, said that they speculated that you could that there was this distinct difference in land values because there was no public access to that lake. But they didn't provide any information about why, about what the extra fee would be. And also the lake in Minneapolis was entirely, had a complete public access. To compare those 2 examples of no public access whatsoever to complete public access, and then compare that to Evanston, to me, it's not apples to apples. It's like apples to basketballs. We have an enormous amount of public access. We have 42 properties that are lakefront. We have 5 beaches. We have Northwestern's property is open to public access. We have a public boat launch. We have paths along the lakefront, and their argument in this. So I find this argument not at all on point to what we have here in Evanston. I mean, what we have here in Evanston is entirely different. So I would not be the least bit interested in hiring a consultant. $100,000. I mean, we've had objections for hiring a consultant for an analysis of the Civic Center, a whole complete analysis of the Civic Center programming at $400,000, and that barely passed the council. $100,000 for a consultant to look at 42 properties, and I am dead certain that we will. This has a litigation risk that is, I would bet you it is 100% certain that we will be sued on this. So we'll spend $100,000 on an RFP for a consultant to be sued by folks because I looked at this. My land use lawyer chops are a little rusty, but I do question whether the legitimacy of the city to be able to do this. The staff has told us they do not have any staff to work on this. And RFPs, Councilmember Reed, have to be prepared. I mean, the staff has said they are overstretched and do not have anyone to work on this. RFPs are prepared by our city staff, and then they would have to analyze all of the responses that come in. They're not cost-free. So to me, the possible return that we would get from looking at 42 lakefront properties, what are we going to do? Charge them each another $50,000? To me is really, I don't see it. The cost-benefit analysis here, to me, far outweighs doing this. And we already have a city staff that says they do not have the time to undertake this. I don't think, Councilmember Burns, that we can try and talk with Northwestern about more of those issues. We have talked and talked and talked with them over the years. There is going to be a new president of Northwestern coming in, so we should certainly initiate a conversation with her. But our history with them is I mean, we are certainly on better footing with them than we were 10 years ago, but that took 20 years to get there. So when I look at this, this is a really tiny amount of our lakefront. Overwhelmingly, our lakefront has public access. So the idea that we would impose this fee and think that it could withstand legal attack by using this example from Minnesota, they're not even saying that they were successful in Minnesota. This paper was speculation. And it wasn't a Harvard-educated author of the paper. He was a college student at UNC. So
Point of information.
Hold on, I'm not done.
Sure.
I have to say, I think this is, it's a nice idea to think about, but we don't have time to just think about stuff like this. And we certainly don't have money or staff to think of this. We have a lot of other ideas. Councilmember Reed, you have a lot of other much better ideas than this one that I would be willing to support, but not this one. It doesn't matter whether I represent lakefront homeowners. This just does not make financial sense to undertake this. We will undoubtedly be sued. Okay. Councilmember Reed.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I just want to respond. And my first concern was my point of information. When I look at the packet, I didn't receive, and I don't know if other council members received the documents you're referring to about the UNC student and the college folks who are whatever those documents are. That's not in the packet from what I saw, and someone please correct me. You may have received those or found those separately. So first, can I get clarification? Am I looking at a packet that's different than the one you received?
The only thing that's in the packet is the memo that I prepared.
Okay. My understanding was that there, in your discussion with staff before this, you had sent them a copy of a memo that was written by someone.
No.
Okay. All right. Well, I believe that the memo comes from the same group whose video we just looked at.
Okay. I'm not sure about that. But what I can say is, this is not something that was just studied by, some college student. This is, a serious organization of, Joe Minicozy, who is a Harvard graduate, has a specialty, who's a public planner, a certified public planner, has a specialty degree in real estate, something related to real estate, has backed this up. I do want to say that Wayzata is also a community that has plenty of, I'm looking at their city's website. They have boat launches and beaches and, fountains and fishing and gardens and outdoor showers at their lakefront and playgrounds and all kinds of really great, water sports for their lakefront. So they've got, so this isn't a community that has nothing going on their lakefront either. They've certainly got beaches and they've certainly got public access on their lakefront too. And these effects are still witnessed here. I could see that the cost of $100,000, that's also a number. I just threw that out there. I threw out a couple numbers to say, but we don't know until we actually get the RFPs back, how much it may cost. And, I could see this bringing in anywhere between, this could bring in a substantial amount of money and not something to scoff at, that could provide funding for much of the equity work that we want to do, even if it's $50,000 to $100,000 annually.
But
that
Councilmember Reed, that's assuming that this would pass legal muster. I don't think it will. I've been receiving emails all day long from lawyers saying that this would not pass legal muster. So I think I'm not willing to risk litigation for something without having any sense that another community has even done this successfully. I mean, Minnesota has not undertaken this.
Well, again.
Have they? I don't believe they have.
I don't know if Wayzata has. It seems like Wayzata would be a community that may not. And I think if we're going to, of course, folks who are wealthier and who live on the lakefront have the resources to try to protect, their wealth. And of course, they will sue if they feel that their interests aren't being.
But as fiduciaries of the city of Evanston, I don't want to belabor this, but as fiduciaries,
Sure.
which we all are here on the city council, part of our job is to protect the corporate body and to undertake something that I think we risk serious litigation costs for on the hope that we might gain more revenue. There are other better ideas, better progressive ideas that I would much rather spend time on than this one. So I think that, and I'm going to go back to, the staff has said they do not have staff for this. RFPs take weeks to prepare by city staff. So our city staff is up to their eyeballs in work already. And I am not willing to add an extra layer of work onto them for a really speculative amount of money. I mean, I'm happy to do RFPs for affordable housing projects, for traffic calming efforts, for things that have clear, concrete value to our community. But this is speculative to me, and I think we're really risking litigation and getting ourselves caught up in something that's not money well spent. I would rather spend our money in other areas to develop better sources of revenue than this.
So Councilmember Wynn, Councilmember Burns has another
Oh, I'm
comment.
sorry. Go ahead, Councilmember Burns.
Yeah, I mean, this is just for discussion, so I think, if Councilmember Reed agrees, we've probably expressed about as much as...
Staff is seeking direction to issue an RFP.
Express as much as we can. I don't think this is probably the right time for this, although I do, I think that, I talked about how we need a work plan for this body. Staff not being able to do certain things it makes sense, but that can't be the answer when we try to do things. Again, we're a body without staff, and so we have no way to explore different ideas other than to present it to this body of hope that the city manager will then assign staff to look into things. And so we have to get better at figuring out what is the process for this body to generate new ideas, which then could in turn generate new sources of revenue, which we need. So that can't be the answer every time. We have to figure out how to do that better. And I have a proposal coming up that I think can help us do that.
I'd like to see that, Councilmember Burns, but I do think that we do have to do some kind of cost-benefit analysis of on the value of our staff time, and recognize that they have a lot on their plate because of COVID, because of the new TIF that we just put into place, for a number of other programs that we have going on with respect to affordable housing. I think that that's something we need to get more information about the capacity of our staff right now, and I don't want to put another new program on them when they already have a lot going on. We have this ARPA money it's real money in the bank, in our bank already, a bank account already, that we need to manage and manage as an investment in the community. That's where we need to put some staff and see where that develops.
No, I agree right now. I mean, we're clearly in a transition period. We're staff is deciding to move on every day here. So we're in a particular position right now where I think we don't have the staff. I guess what I'm saying is this went through the referrals process, as far as I understand, and the answer is still the same, that right, we don't have the staff to work on it. So I think we need to find a better process to determine what ideas are going to be pursued for further research and which ones aren't. And right now, I don't think we have that. It's not clear. We thought it was a referrals committee. It doesn't seem like that's the case. You may still reach a dead end at some point. And so, but again, Councilmember Reed, just what I'm interested in is any information or data that can help inform future conversations about pilot agreements or anything that can help us understand what are we losing as a city, either from lack of access to our lakefront or lack of property taxes paid because of lakefront property, which I understand is it's about two different issues. But that's what I'm interested in. I really want to understand, what are we losing? Could we be generating more in a reasonable and fair manner from our lakefront if we made some adjustments? And if this analysis could help inform some of those future conversations, I would be interested to know just what the price would be. But we could talk about that further offline. But I probably agree this probably isn't the greatest time to make this decision.
Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Councilmember Reed.
Yes, thank you. I want to, so the memo said that staff does not have the time to do the actual research. And so I want to ask Joanna, one, this referral was made months ago, 5 or so months ago. And so, Johanna, are you, and there hasn't seemingly been a lot of turnover, particularly in your department and the staff that would be working on this kind of RFP. In fact, we bolstered for next year some of the staffing. Is it your understanding that your staff does not have the capacity to even draft an RFP to have someone else do this work?
So I think when we talked, what I said is no capacity. Also, when we had our meeting, I said no capacity in terms of expertise. We don't necessarily have staff in the community development department that take on, tax proposals and estimates of proposed opportunities, missed opportunity costs. That's not our forte in the community development department. We reclassified a position last year in community development. I'm down a manager. I asked for that position to be added back in. It was not for 2022. We added permit desk staff because the problem in community development is permit desk staff. I think this is across the board. I'm speaking sort of generally for the city, I guess. It's very hard to find people to do these jobs, even if we're recruiting. HR has to do a lot of work to try to recruit, and it's all these little things that they add up. And so it's been very challenging to add more staff across the board in the city, find qualified people who are prepared to do the work. We're still missing a lot of the support infrastructure, nationally, internationally, locally, that supports people to go back to work, to be in person for work. So those are just challenges we're experiencing as an organization. That's not just limited to us. So we could draft it. There's other people that are part of the system in terms of reviewing a request for proposals. There's people in purchasing that review it and help us through the process to make sure it's in the newspaper correctly. There's people that then review it as a team from other departments. Then we prepare and bring it back to, sure, could we do that? Definitely. But it becomes, executing and working with a consultant to help provide the scope of work, track what they're doing, making sure that the tax dollars that are spent on this project, the consultant is accountable to doing the work correctly and then preparing it and coming back. It certainly lightens our load to have consultants do the work, and it extends an expertise that we don't have on staff, but it's not without work to be done. And the staff I do have right now is starting to undertake the comprehensive plan. And I do think this is exactly the kind of idea that could be added into the comprehensive plan that could then have be part of a short, medium, or longer term goal to address some of the equity issues and distribution of wealth and lakefront fees and other opportunities to pursue. This is exactly the kind of thing that I think, as a planner, also a member of the AICP, would recommend that we include this sort of thing in a plan so it could be implemented down the road. It's certainly laudable to try to think about how do we level the playing field, but I would much rather see it included in a plan, because then a plan document increases the transparency. So somebody isn't caught off guard on December 13th that this is up for discussion. A plan document is vetted. There's community meetings, there's discussions before it's adopted. People have seen it quite a bit, and so this would be a great opportunity to put that in that kind of document.
Thank you. I just wanted, sorry, if I could just distill the question I asked there, which was, I heard you say that the capacity issue was in part, yes, you are, times are tough and everyone has a tough workload. But part of the capacity was an expertise on the staff, which is expected. This isn't something we do every day. But you do have the capacity to issue the RFP for this. And this wouldn't be something that would place an unduly, an over encumbersome burden on your staff?
I would say to some extent, yes, because we just don't have, it's not going to get done in the first half of 2022 because I have other things that are in the queue. I have staff that are doing double duty to do work on ARPA things because we don't have the staff to do that yet. Staff is supposed to work 37 and a half hours a week. I can tell you without a doubt that the staff in the community development department work far more than that. And sometimes we compensate them through flex time or comp time or through overtime, but generally they are not working 37 and a half hours a week. And in a time when we are seeing burnout headlines and mental health, I have had staff that have come to me and shared concerns about their own mental health over their workload. So I just want to be clear that adding more work does not necessarily help with all of those issues. And nobody is saying no to these opportunities. I think we like to do these academic exercises and think about how we could make Evanston a better place and be a leader in all this. But it's just an issue of prioritization. And right now the staff is really prioritizing the comp plan because that's what we heard from the budget process. And we're really excited about the opportunities to include things like this in that proposal and where that could take us and be an award-winning community plan when it's all done.
So, I do think, Councilmember Reed, as I said, I think you come up with a lot of interesting ideas. When I listen to Johanna, what I'm hearing her say very, very politely is her staff doesn't have the capacity to do this. Because in order to do this, then other things are going to be put to the side. And we've already decided we need a new comprehensive general plan. And we have the ARPA money that must be spent. And as she says, this can be added into the comprehensive general plan. I agree with Councilmember Burns. Now is not the time to undertake this. I don't want to lose any more of our community development staff. So I can't support this.
If I could just say one last thing, and I would just say as a kind of a rule of thumb, and I still feel the same way. I don't think this is the greatest time, but moving forward, let's make the first response, hey, this might be a great idea to pursue. Here's where we think it fits. I think sometimes the immediate response is a defensive one, and then council members try to tear someone's idea down, acting as though they researched it better than the researchers have, which we know you haven't. None of us have had the time to really vet this idea fully. And so I think next time, hey, this might be something to look into. This is where it fits, right? It fits within a comprehensive plan. And that's some work we need to do as a body of just understanding how to work better together. Maybe we need to do some retreat as a council, but because I've run into that myself, working with staff and working with my colleagues up here. And I think this conversation would have been over a lot sooner if we would have led with that, because I think there might be something here that's worth exploring if we have more information, if we had the staff capacity to look further into it, et cetera. Not to say, Councilmember Nguyen, some of your remarks you wouldn't have said either way, but I think we've done all of that just to work our way back to, hey, maybe this has a place in, a comprehensive planning process.
Right, it might very well, but I also want to empower the staff to be able to say to us, we don't have the capacity to do that. Because I think that we, as a council, are generating ideas, but they're in a really difficult position to say to us, I don't have the capacity to do that. That may be a great idea, but I already am working on 5 other great ideas. So that's why I'm speaking so forcefully, because I see how tired and exhausted the staff is. I see all of the things that we are ambitious goals that we have and ambitious projects that we have embarked on. So that's why I'm speaking forcefully, because I think the staff is too polite to. Okay.
No, I understand, and I've made recent concessions because of which Joanna knows, because of kind of the lack of capacity at the staff. But I think again, just leading with, hey, this has some merit. Here's where we believe it fits, and it doesn't make people feel as though it will never get worked on, because the balance is, again, we're here to do our job, right? We work long hours too.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And you know what I mean?
And anything
And-
like this has to find support on the council.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the question is like, how do we know how do we find that support in a process that everybody agrees on? Is it the referrals committee process? Is it some other process that says, you know what, this is an idea we're willing to move forward with, so that staff understands like, okay, we're at a point now where we have enough support to move forward with this idea. We haven't figured that out yet. So that's why I'm going
to jump in one more time
Yeah.
on you and just say, okay, this is my gray beard, that I always have, to say the way to form support for something that's this different an idea is to talk to each other council member. I mean, that's traditionally what has happened when someone comes up with a really new and different idea. They call up the fourth ward alderman and say, I want to run this past you before I present it to see if I can get any support for this at the council. Call you up and say, I'm thinking about this. I want to run it past you. Give me your feedback on it. That's the legislative process. And that's something this council hasn't learned yet. But I think that when we start doing that, especially for ideas that are new and different, that's when we start working better together. So I don't want to take up any more of our time. I'm going to turn this back over.
If I can close out with a final motion, I do just want to say that, part of the legislative process is this fact gathering. I could call you and have you or whoever else and have a conversation with this, but until we actually have the data, it's hard to really have the discussion beyond a theoretical level. And so that's what this request was. It was to move beyond the theoretical, have some hard data as far as cost, then beyond cost, if we went forward with it, the actual data and what the lost revenue is, and then be able to work from there, as well as figuring out the legal implications before we move forward with this. But with that, I see that right now, and I do also want to note that, this referral was made 5 months ago. It was one of the first referrals that I made a week or two into being into office. So at this point, it's been, almost half a year that we've had to prepare just a single RFP and to go through that process. But I would like to make a motion to table this to June and bring this back for discussion at the June 6th meeting of the Planning and Development Committee.
Second.
Well, this is an item for discussion, so I don't know whether you can table it. Can it be tabled, council?
Yes.
No, I'm asking our corporation counsel.
Good evening, Deputy City Attorney Michelle Ozuribo. I can take a moment to check to see if we can table this. I know that the goal for an item for discussion is to give the staff guidance on what to do with the item on the agenda. So I will just double check to see if that can be tabled or if we need to vote on the direction for staff at this moment. So if I can just
real quick,
chime in with my Robert's rules. Go ahead.
Chairman, I think another thing we've seen staff do is come up with an estimate. Everything doesn't have to be an RFP.
But an estimate for what?
On costs, on what this may cost.
In terms of staff time or
No.
how much a consultant would cost?
Exactly, right. And that's a phone call or two. I've had this conversation with staff before on other issues. We don't have to do a detailed RFP just to get cost estimates. We've done that before.
Okay. No.
I'm just saying,
I'll just say again, I'm not interested in pursuing this at this time.
No, I understand, but I guess to Councilman Newsmen, and I just want to be clear, you have some people who don't want to see this even discussed any further, but then we've also heard this may have a place in the comprehensive planning process. So I think that's what I need to get clear on before I decide how to vote. This is either something that, my colleagues are saying has no merit at all and won't support it under any circumstances, don't even want to consider it any further or discuss it, or it has place potentially in our comprehensive planning process or some other process.
As I understand the proposal right now, I don't think this is an idea that has a very good long-term prognosis. Is there another way to address these issues if we do a little bit more thinking and pull back our focus, and we're not talking just about an access fee? There might, there's more to the discussion than that I'm sure we would all learn from.
Yes.
Councilor
Ms.
Zarebo, I
I'm
think
going to
she-
go with Ms. Newsma.
No.
Yeah. You want to
Director
Okay.
Neiden.
Okay.
Do you hear me? Right.
Yes.
Okay.
I was calling on you. Yes.
Okay, so,
Oh,
Neiden.
I'm looking, I'm sorry.
Okay, Director Neiden.
The two of you show up
We have
one
started,
after
yeah,
another on my.
we're in your same sideline. Okay, so I have been collecting in a spreadsheet some of these sorts of things that have come up that I think everyone's starting to hear that I have a refrain of. How about the comp plan? How about the comp plan? So I could also put this in that spreadsheet, or we could create a Google Share document that council members could start to put ideas into this as they come up. Maybe that's another option, so that everyone could see what's going on. We have in the past brought. The direction has been to revisit an item at a later date. We could put it on for sometime in June if that's the desire. I mean, any of those things can happen. I know it's late, and I know there's other events coming, so I want to be mindful of the time.
Yeah. Corporation Counsel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, good evening, Deputy City Attorney Michelle Zuribo. I did get a chance to take a look at procedurally how this would proceed. So the committee would have the option to table this to a date certain. However, it would be tabled for further discussion. So that would be, so if you do want to table it for discussion, you can do so. It would be tabled for further discussion for that date certain. So thank you for giving me that opportunity to look into that.
Okay.
Yes.
So Councilmember Reed, did you want to make a motion to table it for discussion to that date certain of June 6th?
Yes, and I just want to confirm, is that the regularly, I forget if it's the first or second Monday in a month that these meet?
No, we
So
meet
what is
the second and fourth Mondays.
Yeah, okay. So that would be the first, so actually I will, June 13th is the second Monday in June. So I will table it until June 13th.
Second.
Ms. Neiden, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Wynn?
No.
Councilmember Newsma?
No.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
That's a no.
Okay. So
I don't know if that is a no.
No, there's no recommendation.
a tie is no recommendation, so.
Which means,
Councilmember Reed, why don't we talk about this offline and so how we can talk about your idea? Does that sound good?
We don't have to vote on a motion to table to a date certain.
yes, we do.
Yeah.
We do?
All right. I think.
I mean, I'd love if we didn't, because then it would just be tabled, so I would love to
I'm sorry,
say no, but,
I was thinking of hold.
yeah,
No,
yeah.
hold, but you can't hold for that far in advance. So I am,
Well, I move to hold this to the next meeting, and we'll have another member here at the next meeting that can make the final determination. We won't have a tie then.
don't do that. For lack of a second, the motion fails. So I am going to turn this back over to Councilmember Ravel to resume chairmanship.
Okay, well, thank you, Councilmember Wynn and committee members for this robust discussion, and I believe we have no further business to come before the committee, so we are adjourned.